Many years ago, when a young Geo started work and he went on the career path, started earning money, spending money, paying taxes. And yes, I know, I can hear you. Oh yeah, you're right. It was many years ago, Geo. All right, cheeky. Leave it out. Thank you very much. But back then, I got lucky because I worked with someone who was very good at his job, and he passed a lot of his knowledge on to me, and he enhanced a lot of my skills. He made a big impact on me. He molded me a lot as a young adult, and I can hear and see a lot of him in me today. But the reason I bring him up is because he had an ethos, a culture at work, and he had a phrase that he always stuck by, which was to create an environment where success is inevitable. I've never ever forgot it, and I've used it for my life since working with him. But the principle is just that, to have the right people in the right places and to create an environment where those people can thrive. Because as a business owner, if you do those things, your life will be easier. You need to employ the right people, put them in the right places. And if you've done that and the environment is correct, they will succeed. It will come down to that person's ability and to that person's attitude. But for them to be a barometer of their success, that environment, being allowed to be successful, has to be in place first and foremost. And I don't think that's the case at West Ham when it comes to being the head of recruitment, the sporting director, whatever terminology and job title you wish to use. Kyle Macaulay never stood a chance at West Ham United. Kyle Macaulay was never ever going to succeed at West Ham for two reasons. Number one, the structure of the club. It's not built for someone in that position to be able to do their job. And number two is the attitude of those managing the club. That is not in place to allow that person to thrive. Kyle Macaulay was never going to be a success depending on his ability and attitude. He was just going to be prevented from having a chance because of West Ham United. Now, you've seen the news yesterday, he's gone to Manchester United as head of senior scouting. I don't really care that he's gone to Man U, truth be told. It doesn't really bother me. But I think the fact that he's picked up quite a high profile job is another example and another bit of embarrassment for David Sullivan in the way that he manages this football club, and in particular the player recruitment side of things. I specifically want to talk about that today because West Ham has got a cycle. We rely on a certain agent. We will be influenced by agents when it comes to the transfer market. Then it'll go stale. We'll realise actually football doesn't really work like this anymore. You've got to get more bang for your buck. And the best way to do that is to bring in young players with lots of potential. And football agents ain't the way to do that. That's not the way to discover that talent. They're also looking for that talent, because if they can sign them up young and they go on and make it big time, the agent financially benefits as well. So we'll have the player agent thing, and then we'll get fed up. We'll get bored and decide we need to try something a little bit different. So let's bring in a head of scouting, head of recruitment, a sporting director, whatever job title you want to give that person. We'll bring that person in. But that person has a lifespan at West Ham, and it ain't very long. And eventually we'll move on to the next part of the cycle, which is we need to discredit that person. We've got to do the PR side of the game. We've got to put reasons out there as to why that person won't be at West Ham any longer. And there's various reasons as to why that person may not be at West Ham any longer. But we have to go through that period where we discredit him first and foremost. Then eventually we get rid of that person and we go back to the agent-led stuff as well. Now, sometimes it goes hand in hand with this cycle of a manager. So the manager gets sacked, so that person at head of recruitment who goes hand in hand with the manager, he goes as well. And that's what's happened here with Kyle Macaulay. Potter went, so Macaulay went. It's what happened with Mario Huselos. Pellegrini left, so Mario Huselos left as well. But it's not always with a manager cycle. David Moyes is the example here, because David Moyes was here long enough. He had Rob Newman, and then we decided, well, we don't want that anymore. We want to change it. Let's bring in Tim Steidten. We changed how we attacked the transfer market, despite the fact that the manager was the same. And then we got rid of Moyes and we got rid of Steiden anyway. But in between that, Rob Newman found his role at West Ham. He almost got demoted without any sort of official announcement or anything like that. We never stick to it because we don't have a plan. We make it up as we go along. Then when we decide the next plan, let's get someone in to oversee it. He gets about 1 transfer window, 2 transfer windows at the most. And after a couple of months, that's it. Job done. Hasn't worked. Out you go. Sacked. And in the case of Kyle Macaulay, he was never going to succeed. He was never, ever going to succeed. But I'll tell you when you don't decide if he's succeeded or not. 2 months into a season, you don't give him a summer transfer window and then 2 months later decide whether or not he's done enough. That ain't good enough. We won't know if Juve, Magassa, Hermansen, we won't know if they're good signings for West Ham or not, and Fernandes as well, until another year, 2 years at least. We have suspicions that Juve will be, Magassa might be, Fernandes will be, Hermansen won't be. That's our suspicions right now. But bearing in mind, we've had a couple of months between getting rid of Macaulay till today as well. We've had a little bit longer to look at them. But to sort of decide, come to a conclusion on someone in that role in such a short space of time is absolutely madness. And it's the way we go about it as well that frustrates me. I've got no particular like or dislike for Kyle Macaulay. I don't know him. I know very little about him. I'm convinced I've played football against him at some point because of our ages in the region and stuff. I may have come across him on a football pitch without realising it. But apart from that, I've got no bias one way or another. But what I do have a bias for is the way that West Ham United is run. And the fact that we paid £1 million compensation for Kyle Macaulay. That was a lot of money. It's a significant amount of money, that. We brought him in. He got 1 transfer window, and even then we can debate over how much control he had. And then we sacked him. We paid him for him to leave the club, and he's gone and got a high-profile job at Old Trafford. Now, even if he had to go in the sense that Nuno come in and went, I don't want Kyle Macaulay here, I'd be surprised at that, given that Nuno's shown a tendency to work with his coaching team, bar one, is made up of coaches from the academy for a start. So he's promoted from within in that role. Yes, Nuno would like to have a say, or a big say, or even control over who comes in the January transfer window. But Kyle Macaulay, as we understand it, wasn't... Tim Steiden was someone that wanted control of the squad in the sense of he wanted to build the squad as much as he could. But even he still had Max Kilman coming in for Lopetegui. Even he had Wan-Bissaka and Somerville arriving because David Sullivan liked them. So even he was able to allocate some of the budget and bring in players that he perhaps didn't want, but he felt it was the right thing to do because either his chairman or his head coach wanted them. Therefore, he was bringing those players in, as well as ones that he wanted, such as Niklas Füllkrug and Jean-Claude Todibo. In the summer, I bet you there was players that was brought in that Kyle Macaulay didn't want. Say Callum Wilson, for example. Now, Wilson turned out to be a good signing, but I'm not trying to, for now, to discuss the success of the signings or not. It's more the role. I think Kyle Macaulay showed in the summer that he could be the head of recruitment, but also work with the head coach and let them have control. For Nuno to say to Macaulay, I want a striker that can do X, Y, Z. It's up to Macaulay to go work with the team and identify and bring options to Nuno and let him have the final say. I don't feel like Macaulay had to leave the club. But even if between Sullivan, Brady and Nuno it was decided that he was no longer needed at West Ham, at least put him on garden leave or something, or just keep him at the club without him having any responsibility or having a major say in things, so that if he does get poached, he does get headhunted, excellent, we'll get a bit of compensation for him. We will get, I'd imagine, our money back for him. Because at that time, I think it was a safe bet that Potter would get another job at a club. He's now manager of Sweden, so of course they don't need Kyle Macaulay involved. But when we dismissed Kyle Macaulay, we didn't know Graham Potter's next job was going to be the Swedish job. It could have been head coach at another club, and Potter has shown at Swansea, at Brighton, at Chelsea, and at West Ham United, that when he gets a job, he wants Kyle Macaulay with him. So I think it would be fair to assume that if Graham Potter got another job at another club, he would have come back to West Ham and said, oh, I'll have Kyle Macaulay, please, and we would have got our compensation for him. We didn't even wait to find out if that was the case. We just paid him to leave the club. So we paid £1 million for him, gave him a summer, and then paid him to bugger off, and now he's at Man United in quite a high-profile job as well. In regards to the summer, and this is something the club has to change, and I go back to culture, because Macaulay's gone now, but the environment is still the same, the culture is still the same. The chances or lack of chances of success in a role like that, because we will have someone, I feel confident we will have another head of recruitment or sporting director at some point in the future. It might not be for the January transfer window, it might not be for the summer one, but eventually in the next 2 or 3 years, unless there's a change in ownership, we will hire someone again that's going to be in charge of player recruitment. And between now and then, things have to change so that person has a chance of success. And also West Ham have a chance of having longevity in that role. We need someone that will be here for the next head coach and the next head coach. That is ideal. And I appreciate we don't live in an ideal world, but we have to do what we can to get as close to it as possible. But in the summer, I'll tell you what's upset me the most. It's not sacking Macaulay. It's not him only having one transfer window or anything like that. It's the PR game that the club played in order to justify sacking him. Had they got rid of Potter and it said, also thanks to Kyle Macaulay, he was excellent while he was here, but we just want a clean slate, a change of direction with Nuno. Again, I might not agree with it, but I would understand it. But before his sacking, as soon as Potter went, that was it. Time to go after Kyle Macaulay. Just like it happened with everyone before him in a similar role. Tim Steidten got battered by leaks from the club before he actually left West Ham. The amount of leaks that came out about Tim Steidten, just battering him over and over and over again. We all knew he was going to go before he knew he was going to go. And it happened with Kyle Macaulay. Because at the end of it, it was, Macaulay didn't actually identify Fernandes and Juve. It was Maximilian Hans. Now, it could have been. And when I've mentioned this before, a couple of subscribers said, but this person in particular is the one that broke the news that it was Hans and not Macaulay. But here's the thing. It was the same source that said it was Kyle Macaulay that wanted them in the summer. So the same source said Kyle Macaulay identified Juve as well as Magassa, as well as Fernandes. And then the same source again later on said, actually, it wasn't Macaulay, it was Hans. Well, you're just basically doing the club's bidding on their behalf. You're getting that message from the club and you're putting it out there. And I think if you're a journalist or an in the know or whatever title you want to give yourself, when that happens, you should turn around and say, hang on a minute, you told me it was Macaulay in the summer. What's with the change of narrative? Because I'll tell you what the change of narrative was for. So that they could sack him, so that they could turn the fan base against Macaulay. And then the fan base didn't even care that much. They're not that bothered really about the head of recruitment. But basically it was, you lot out there, listen up. That guy Macaulay, not very good. Hans, he's the man. He's the one that identified the players that you like. And to take the piss, and this was taking the piss, to take the piss at the same time they told us, unofficially via the club, told us, Macaulay, the only player he wanted was Hermansen. Well, we know that's bollocks, because Graham Potter always uses his goalkeeping coach to identify which goalkeeper to bring in, not Kyle Macaulay. If the one position in the team Kyle Macaulay doesn't get involved in, it's the goalkeeping one. Potter has his goalkeeping coach, and he relies on him. Now, you could say, maybe you're wrong, Gio, perhaps, but for those that were subscribers over the summer will know, this was very, very predictable. Because I sat here consistently saying, we won't sign a goalkeeper until he's got his goalkeeping coach. And we didn't sign a goalkeeper. And Kasper Ankergen rocked up. As soon as he was in, it was a case of, I bet it's Mads Hermansen. And Danish goalkeeping coach from Brøndby, who used to work with Hermansen, is now at West Ham United. It will be Hermansen we go after. Then we go and sign Mads Hermansen. So either I've got very lucky with my guesses, or there's merit in those claims and predictions. And the merit is, that is probably what happened. I think it was Casper Ankergren that really wanted Mads Hermansen at West Ham, not Kyle Macaulay. So not only did the club start removing the successful transfers from Kyle Macaulay, they started attaching the ones that hadn't worked out so far to Kyle Macaulay as well. They're taking the piss, really. And they just didn't need to do it. There was no need to do it whatsoever. Most people would understand that when Potter went, you got rid of the guy that was only here because of Graham Potter. Just keep it that simple. But they go one step further, and they almost have to just slag someone off before they actually get rid of them. There's zero clash. Now, the club will have plausible deniability. They'll say, we never said any of those things. They don't have to, because we've been in this game long enough. We've had them in charge for over a decade. We know what they're like. They do this time and time again. And if this was a one-off, if it was Kyle Macaulay and that was it, if Tim Sneijden got perfect treatment, if Rob Newman got perfect treatment, fair enough. But they didn't. It happens again and again and again. As I said, it's a cycle at West Ham United. Hiring Macaulay, sacking Macaulay, and him going and getting a job at Man United is just a representation of how West Ham United is run under David Sullivan. And he should be embarrassed by it. He should be absolutely embarrassed by that. When you get a head of recruitment or a director of football or a sporting director, they need time. They need windows, plural. They need money, lots of it. They need consistency from a head coach as well. Because even if Macaulay was still here, you've gone from a manager in Graham Potter to, let's call it a head coach in Graham Potter, to a completely different type of head coach in Nuno. The requirement for what they need from players is two different things for a lot of the time. There's certain players that will work fine under both, but not all of them will. The goalkeeper is possibly a perfect example. Areola couldn't cope under Graham Potter, and I think he's doing well under Nuno. Hermansen's strengths, those traits, suit what Graham Potter wanted. Feels a little unnecessary under Nuno. Nuno doesn't require his goalkeeper to be excellent at distribution. He needs to be excellent at shot stopping because you're going to face plenty of them. Distribution, just go long. Just belt it down the middle of the pitch. That trait is down the bottom of the priority list when it comes to Nuno. So we went after a keeper in the summer, spent 60 million on him, and a couple of months later, what we required from a goalkeeper was now completely different. There's no consistency whatsoever at West Ham. And if David Sullivan was a good chairman and he was the one that put this identity in place at the football club, so when we hired a new manager, a new head coach, there was consistency in playing styles, then the squad maybe would have half a chance. But it doesn't. You go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Every single time the squad needs to change. A lot of money needs to be spent. Because what Nuno's got now is a Frankenstein squad. That bench is not fit for purpose. We can debate whether or not ability-wise they're up to it in the Premier League. I think the answer is no. But when you look at just the player profiles he's got available to him, it doesn't fit what he wants to do at West Ham United. So when January comes around, he's going to have to try and rectify that to the best of his ability, which means selling players and bringing players in. More money spent. A different person in charge of the January transfer window. That person may or may not be in charge of the summer 2026 transfer window. We don't know yet. But I'm quite confident at some point someone else will be in charge of a transfer window and the cycle will restart. He'll be here for a little while. Sullivan will get a little bit bored of someone else playing with his toy, discredit him, sack him. He's back in charge with agents influencing how West Ham go about things in the transfer market. Eventually, pressure will get to Sullivan. He'll realise this doesn't work anymore. A new head coach comes in who wants to bring in his own head of recruitment. We'll hire him. Things will go stale. Repeat. Welcome to West Ham United, where the environment is set up so the person in that head of recruitment role is destined to fail. And even if they were a success, it doesn't really matter. You're not here long enough to find out whether it's a success or not. And even if it was tough, we're going to take the credit away from you and give it to someone else. That's the West Ham United way under David Sullivan.